Hello and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. I have a very special guest today with me, Brig Manoranjan Singh, a mentor of sorts to me as well as a hotelier. Brigadier Manoranjan Singh, Vir Chakra, is a retired infantry officer from the Mahar Regiment. Of course, during his service, he took part in many operations within the Indian Army. One of the most noteworthy was the IPKF, known as Operation Pawan, or the Indian military operations conducted in Sri Lanka. That is also the place where he won his Vir Chakra. Post his career with the Indian Army, he joined in the hospitality industry, wherein he mentored many a young fellow like myself who wanted to join the hospitality industry. He has his hands into entrepreneurship as well. Thank you, sir, for joining me this afternoon and accepting to share your thoughts about the IPKF and your personal experiences.
You're welcome, Adil.
So what we will do is, we'll start the discussion on a very broad basis. What was the IPKF and what were we trying to do when we got involved in the whole operation, sir?
IPKF is actually the Indian peacekeeping force. There was an accord signed between our Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi and President Jayawardene, which was to provide autonomy to the Tamil groups, which had turned militant, operating in the Jaffna Peninsula, Trincomalee and Batticaloa. So in this accord, the various militant groups were required to surrender their arms. And post surrender of arms, they were to be given greater autonomy. And the Indian peacekeeping force was required to oversee this sort of a operation. Now, actually, what happened, all the militant groups surrendered their arms peacefully, except the LTTE, surrendering arms. So this led to a lot of friction between the peacekeeping forces, the Tamil, the Sri Lankan military, and the Indian political leadership. So ultimately, a large number of troops were inducted to force the LTT to surrender the arms, as also to relieve, as also to get into Jaffna and take over Jaffna from the LTT. So that is the background why additional troops were inducted. Initially, there was only one division which was inducted to oversee the surrender of arms by the militants. But thereafter, when things went out of control, and by August 87, actually, it became quite apparent that LTT is not going to surrender arms unless force is used. So thereafter, the additional troops were sent, and in those additional troops, my battalion was also sent.
So where were you positioned at that time, and how did the news, how was the news kind of broken out to you that you were heading out for this operation?
You see, in the month of September, the feelers had started coming that LTT is not likely to surrender arms, and maybe additional troops were required. So we were located in a place known as Dhana, which is near Saugar in Madhya Pradesh. And our mounting base, if we were required to get into Sri Lanka, was Gwalior, which was the air base, which is about 220 kilometers from Dhana. So we trained for our role because we did not know what was the actual task. The only task known to us was that we have to disarm the militants. And for that, we trained at Dhana. And twice, actually, we got prepared to get to the mounting base in Gwalior. We physically moved to Gwalior and we were ready to move to Sri Lanka. But then again, I think politically some peace talks happened and all, and we were returned to our mounting base. So in this intervening period of about 2 months, we trained really hard for the foreseeable task which was there. Because this task to the Indian Army was absolutely new. Though our troops had operated in insurgency areas in the northeast, at that time this J&K problem about insurgency had not come up. So we were new and we had to evolve our tactics and get the troops trained. The troops, most of the troops had not faced bullets. So greenhorn troops, we had to put them through battle inoculation. So all that training was done in this intervening period of 2 months.
That would have been a very uphill task for for you, sir, because just getting ready for a place that you don't know much about.
Yeah,
What kind
getting
of
ready.
was given to the troops?
Getting ready was one task, but worse was that there were shortages of weapons and equipment. So from the same station, there was a brigade located at Dhana. One battalion moved out. So all their shortage of weapons and equipment was made from our battalion because it was not anticipated our battalion will move out. So ultimately, when we got the orders to move, finally move, we were woefully short of equipment.
That might have been quite a scary proposition. So, what was the task which was allocated to you as an officer as well as your battalion before boarding for the flight from Gwalior, as you mentioned?
We were part of a particular brigade in Dhana, but the entire brigade was not moving. So we were put part of an other brigade headquarter, which was actually located in Gwalior. So prior to moving to Sri Lanka, the brigade commander told me that he's also actually not clear about the task, where actually we are going to be deployed and what are we required to do. We only know that we have to disarm the militants. So we boarded the aircraft. Now boarding the aircraft there was a mix of AN-12s, they are the old aircraft, and AN-32s. And there was a limitation on how much load we can carry. The entire battalion was to move in these aircraft, plus two jeeps were to move along in the aircraft so that we have some sort of mobility there. So all this was loaded, and hurriedly we were moved to Sri Lanka. To tell you something, actually half my battalion moved to Batikalova and half to Palali. Moving to Batikalova was actually a mistake. So it took me another 48 hours to again uplift them by air from Batikalova to Palali, which is in Jaffna, the airfield. So there was no task. Now, on reaching the Palali airfield, when the entire battalion got together, we were woefully short of manpower because many of our men, officers were on courses, were on leaves, were on other types of duties. So actually, willy-nilly, we had a strength of only 60%, which finally landed up in Sri Lanka. So on getting the battalion there, and with the limited weaponry which we had in terms of machine guns, mortars, LMGs, which were handed over to another battalion prior to our move. So we were given the task that you protect the Palali airfield. So we were deployed around the Palali airfield. And I, along with my officers and men, when I went to Recce how to deploy the battalion on the Palali airfield, we were surrounded by LTT cadres, and the LTT cadres started abusing us and threatening us. And to be very frank, we didn't know how to handle the situation because firstly, we didn't understand their language, and secondly, we didn't know how to convey to them if this is what we are doing. We are not getting into any operations. We are just deploying here for the night. So it was very difficult, but we held our patience. We didn't fire. I kept sitting in the jeep. They punctured our jeeps, our vehicles, hurled abuses and all. And this happened for about 7-8 hours. Then certain reinforcements came from the Div headquarters, and then things were calmed down and we deployed there.
That had to be a very scary reception, if I may say so, sir.
Very scary and very difficult because we didn't know how to tackle the situation at that time with these people. Should we fire? There would have been a problem. So we just kept sitting 7-8 hours without water, without anything, without doing anything in our vehicles.
So may I ask you something? I mean, you had obviously about, let's say about hundreds of men with you. There were officers, there were men, there was so much equipment there. How did you actually hold up your men not to open fire in such a volatile situation, looking at the fact that the officers, that the men are accompanied by are being threatened and by abused by these LTT people?
You see, that is where I would say discipline and leadership comes in. Our leaders were constantly telling them that hold it, nothing to be done, no firing, no nothing, calm down in our language. So this is what actually where the leadership and discipline comes in, and good training comes in. That is the only way. Otherwise, one odd person jittery with the weapon and all opens fire, and the whole situation can get out of control.
Absolutely. So you mentioned one example of how you were actually deployed in that airfield, and what was the task that was given to you to, probably make a periphery and protect the assets of that airfield for further operations. What were the kind of challenges that you faced apart from this burning of abuses and stuff like that while doing the actual deployment on the ground?
Actually, this was routine work. We dug our trenches, got deployed and all. But this was not for long, because on 6th we landed in Sri Lanka. Then we were there till 8th, 9th. 9th, actually on 9th we were given orders. Okay, now we have to move to a place known as Kilonechi, and from there launch operations towards Jaffna. So on 10th, the brigade commander called me, and we took a Hepter. And landed in Jaffna Fort. There, the brigade commander actually briefed me, okay, this is what is to be done. Okay, so there, where LTT was located and their leader Prabhakaran was located in Jaffna town was revealed to us, and a debate took place whether we should go and attack that place straight away or we should hold on and launch operations. So in the meantime, while this briefing was going on, our brigade commander and myself, we were called to the div headquarters. So we took off in the chopper and left for div headquarters. While we were taking off in the chopper, some bullets were fired at us. So then started the whole thing, and now it's war. Not war, now it's battle. Now we have to get into action. So we went to the div headquarters, and in the meantime, I gave orders to my battalion to move to Kilonechi, which was about 60 kilometers away from where we were deployed. So the battalion wound up from there and moved towards Kilonochi. And we got our briefing that we have to advance from Kilonochi on axis Kopai South, Kopai North, and to the outskirts of Jaffna to relieve pressure on the Jaffna fort. Because by this time, Jaffna fort had been surrounded by the LTT, and neither the troops there could come out nor they could go in. And there, the troops which were inside Jaffna fort had also been fired on, though they didn't suffer any casualties. So from there, the battalion reached Kilonechi at about midnight or little thereafter, and I also caught up with them, and then started the briefings as to how we have to execute this operation. So quickly, within an hour, the troops were briefed and everything, and we were very woefully short of troops, because my adjutant, while while moving to Kilonechi from Palali airfield, his convoy met with a landmine. The adjutant was injured and few Jawans were injured. So this being the first time, there was a little panic there, so that delay took place. So actually, we could at that particular time only muster 2 companies minus with a woefully short strength of 100, 120, 125, whereas it should have been about a 250 strength. So whatever we had, we said, let us launch, let us not wait for any delay. So we got a few vehicles and we started advancing towards Kopai North on the task which was given to us. When we advanced about 6-7 kilometers, there was an ambush laid out by the LTT for us. So hell broke loose when we reached that ambush site. I was actually leading the column in my jeep. So my jeep just passed. There was another 1-ton vehicle. In those days, we had 1-ton vehicles which are smaller than the vehicles which you see. And then the 3-ton vehicles were there. So as soon as they got the mass of the troops in their firing area, they opened up immediately. But we had practiced our drills during this. If we are ambushed in the vehicle, what is to be done? So, we had taken all types of precautions. So our troops also started firing at them. And this was the first blood of LTT that the IPKF tasted. We killed 5 of them and recovered their weapons also. And we didn't have any casualty. Only one Jawan got some bullet injuries, which were not of a very grievous nature.
Hmm.
Now, the interesting part. Now, the whole area was infested with the LTT, the militants and all. Now, it became a problem how to evacuate this Jawan who was injured. But anyway, in this spirit of the battalion, and the morale was very high since we have killed the people and only one was injured. So immediately volunteers from among the Jawans came, okay, we'll take him back on stretcher to the base where he can get his treatment. So in the meantime, they took this chap on the stretcher, and in the meantime, daylight broke out. Now, once daylight broke out, the Kopai North was hardly 3-4 kilometers away. We could see, and we were in the open without any cover. On one side was a lagoon, so we were targeted between the lagoon, a road, and the Jaffna, which was well entrenched by the LTT with their bunkers and built up area and all. So throughout the day, we could not move. And they kept firing at us with long range weapons. Unfortunately, I didn't have many long range weapons with me at that time because, as I told you, we had handed over. So, anyway, we bore the brunt. And ultimately, at night, we again launched the operations and got a foothold in the Jaffna town. But there were bunkers all around, so the firing carried on. Now, to talk about this particular battle, this battle raged for 9 days, which we'll talk about later. And ultimately, we captured them. So, more details about the battle a little later.
Fantastic. I think, but what comes out of your story is that whatever said and done, there was utter confusion in the way things were deployed and stuff like that. But the team got together and did what it had to be done at that particular point of time. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that initially, with regards to the ammunition shortage and stuff like that, once you captured once you were protecting the airfield, were there some resupplies coming in to you and the other battalions fighting there? How was this whole operation being backed up from the mainland? Was it just air supply? Was it the Navy helping you out? How was it happening?
It was only rations coming in.
Mm-hmm.
At that particular time. We had moved with our, the fighting echelon sort of supplies, the ammunition and weapons which are there for the fighting echelons, because it was only an air bridge which was established. So
Yeah.
there was no supplies coming through the sea route and all, because that normally takes time. Actually, all my vehicles, all my major supplies, they were to come by sea, and the mounting base was Chennai, then Madras, and from Chennai they were to come to Palali, but that didn't happen so quickly. So we were only with our fighting echelon, ammunition, and whatever we had.
That would have been another headache of sorts. So, were there any locals that you interacted with? What kind of a response did you get from them? Was it a pleasant one, or was a stiffened one from the locals in that area?
The locals were fed up of this war which was taking place, so they were sandwiched between the LTT and us, the IPKF, and before that the Sri Lankan forces. So they actually were dazed. They didn't know what to do, which side to. If they helped us, they got a bashing from the LTT. If they helped the LTT, we would get after them that you give us intelligence, you give us information. This is what happens in all insurgencies. Is the main problem is that the local is threatened from both the sides, so he doesn't know what to do. So whichever the side threatens him more, he goes towards that side. Because taxes were collected in the Jaffna. Subsequently, I'll tell you about that, how they used to do it. So the reception by locals was not very cooperative. We could get no intelligence from the locals.
That is one of the things. So, one of the things you mentioned the word insurgency, and what we see today in Jammu and Kashmir, although which is our own territory, is something of the similar lines. Won't you agree on that, sir?
Yeah, it is. Certainly it is. And I would call it, this was a rehearsal to counter insurgency in J&K. This Sri Lankan operation, where a large number of troops were deployed, I think almost about 4 divisions. They were bloodied, and they evolved standing operating procedures, their minor tactics, how to get intelligence. All those drills were actually involved there in a big way, because whatever happened in Northeast insurgency was very small in nature, but this was more of a biggish affair. IEDs, a new concept had come out, different types of IEDs, and how to counter them, how to open the road, how to provide protection. So all these drills, I would say, were perfected by these troops over there, and they got bloodied and ready to counter what happened in 90s in J&K.
So we learned it the hard way, but I guess we did. What we so you what I get out of your answer is basically both the areas are similar, built up areas in of some sorts. With the today the local trend in Kashmir is much more different, but during the early days of the insurgency, the locals, even about 4-5 years ago, when stone throwing and all that used to happen, it was very very hostile. So I can actually picture both of these things together. So
the difference in terrain is that in J&K you have the mountains. In Sri Lanka you didn't have the mountains, but at places you had thick jungles, and to move through those jungles you had to really hack your way. And of course the built up areas were there, which built up areas again are there in J&K also. So fighting operations in built up area is a task by itself, a very difficult and very time consuming task.
Correct. So, just wanted to go back to a couple of days before your deployment. I want to ask you, was there a particular reason that your battalion or your regiment was chosen, or was it just the choice of the day at that particular point in time?
No, I think at the higher level, they decide which troops can be relieved and which troops will not be required for further operations if anything happens in India. If anything happens on the J&K border or the Chinese border, so troops which are there. So these were reserve troops which are lying. So they just pick up from there. And seeing the peace tenure which was coming to an end could be deployed in field areas. So all these things are kept in mind while deploying units in such situations.
Those are general rotation of sorts.
Yeah.
Right, sir. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask you before we come on to, you mentioned about some of the learnings that we got operationally or militarily for the Indian Army. One of the major things I wanted to ask you, so what is your Vir Chakra story? Of course, I've all read the citation, but the citation cannot justify what you can explain. So may I request you to tell me that story, sir?
Okay. The Vir Chakra is more for the leadership and not for actually physical combat, or I killed so many people and I dashed into a bunker and did that. That's not a commanding officer's job also. So unless, forced to do last round, last man, it comes to that. So what actually, and as I told you that we reached Kopai North on 10th. From 10th to 19th, we got no supplies, and we were literally left with very little ammunition. And we faced a LTT cadre of 220 people, which were led by the second in command second in command of Prabhakaran, who was Mahathir himself. And they were well entrenched in bunkers and all over there, and in built up areas, firing from the houses and all. So these 9-10 days, we were stuck there. In the meantime, the build-up had started taking place. Okay. The Div headquarters tried to drop ammunition by hectares, but hectares also they wouldn't permit over there, so the LTT would fire at them. So they also couldn't drop the ammunition. Now, whatever ration we had for those 10 days were from the houses which were located in the Jaffna Peninsula only, from the locals who were there. All the locals that fled, it was the LTT, they had left their houses open and fled. Nobody used to put locks and all. So we fed on their rations, on their chicken which was roaming about, and that sort of thing for 10 days. That was point one. Now, at the on 8th, the tanks were airlifted from India to Jaffna. So then, when it became too much, then it was decided that we deploy the tanks and fire at their bunkers and all, and then assault and then capture this Kopai North. So that was exactly what was done. So on 9th, we got 3 tanks, which is known as a troop of tanks, and these were deployed. Then on 10th, I physically, along with my troops, assaulted their bunkers and all, with the tanks leading, firing, and we behind them and assaulting their bunkers and clearing house by house of the LTT. I myself leading through the various lanes and all. And we had 100 and we counted 126 LTT casualties in this battle. And as far as my casualties were concerned, we were 13 dead, 13 killed in action. So that was the intensity of the battle. And LTT, as you know, was one of the world's best trained and best motivated, I would say, terrorist unit or insurgent unit, whatever you call. So they cleaned the battlefield. Their ethos are that they don't leave any dead body, any weapon, anything behind. But in this battle, they left many dead bodies and some weapons also behind. And there was a big arms factory which was located in Kopaina, and also there was this thing explosive, lot of explosives we recovered from there. In this battle, I lost my radio operator, who was just next to me, and I was giving directions and all by a direct bullet, and he tried to charge towards a bunker. Nirmal Singh, his name was Valda Nirmal Singh, so he lost his life. Plus 12 more lost their lives in this battle. And in those days, none of the dead bodies were evacuated to the mainland. The orders were not there, so we had to carry out the cremations there only, and only send the ashes back. So after that, many things have changed when such things happen.
So one of the things you mentioned, this whole operation took 9 days for it to
Yeah,
this thing. How large an area was this?
uh, very interesting. Just one incident. Just about 4 years back, I took my wife to Sri Lanka, and we landed at Colombo and then drove all the way to Jaffna, and I explained all the battles, the area and all. And one could still see the scars in Jaffna, how the battle was conducted, where they were deployed and all. So you can say Kopai North is a built-up area of the size of, you can say, what example should I give? Um, One of these, let's say, south extension, the entire south extension would be something of Kopai North, with built-up houses and open fields and houses, markets, and all that. That was the sort of thing. And double-storied, three-storied houses, they had taken up positions, dominating positions on these houses on top. Plain area, and toward the south of Kopai North was a lagoon, on which there was a narrow road. So either you went into the lagoon or this thing, but our troops waded through the lagoon and came.
That's a large area to have a 9-day battle in.
So you can say about 250, 300 houses which had to be cleared, and they were all over. And with depleted ammunition, it was one had to really exercise great control.
So what was the tactics that you were? I mean, what kind of? I would not call it operational tactics, but what kind of tactics did you employ to convey the message right down to the last soldier that this is what we need to do and this is how we're going to do it?
I told you that my adjutant and half the unit had got blown up. One vehicle had got blown up, and so their move was delayed. So they actually could never join the battle. So I had just two officers with me. One officer was Major Ramesh Davesar, and one officer was Major Agnihotri. And these were the only two officers and myself who were in the battle. So the orders were conveyed from me to these two officers, from these two officers to the platoon commanders, which were commanded by JCOs, and from the JCOs to the NCOs. So small sections, the orders were conveyed, and they would obey. Everyone would obey the orders and adhere to the drills, procedures which we had practiced. So that is how we actually survived this. And nobody ever asked for any rations or anything. The only crying need they wanted was ammunition, 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 ammunition to fight those people. So we didn't show any big bravado, because we didn't want to lose men. It's when you don't have the resources, you don't have the ammunition. So we would see an opportunity when they were lax or something happened, we would charge into the house, do a little bit of throw a grenade or something, clear that house, and move on to the next. That is how it happened.
So were you able to capture any one of the opposition, sir?
No, no, not at all.
They were that
I think,
battle that it was do or die sort of.
yeah. I think in the entire Sri Lankan operations, uh, very few were captured. Very few of LTT cadres were captured because they had these cyanide capsules. If you capture them, they just ate it and that's it. They finished. So very high motivation, and you could not, even if you got them, you could not extract any information from them. They would rather die than give you information. They were that highly motivated people.
Sir, taking on the conversation that we were having about the lessons that we learned in Sri Lanka, which were used in Kashmir, anything that you like to elaborate for our viewers to understand that how the Indian Army is actually improved after the operations in Sri Lanka?
You see, I think intelligence gathering is the most important thing, and especially in a country, in a foreign country, and especially when you don't know the language. So therefore, one has to be prepared to have interpreters and all for all types of languages. So I ultimately got an interpreter from an artillery unit which had South Indian troops. So that interpreter could translate from Tamil and vice versa. But in those days, this intelligence gathering gadgetry was not there. Now you have drones, you have all types of things. So it was only human intelligence which was there, or uh, signal intelligence, SIGINT, what they call. So what used to happen is that they caught a conversation by a LTT chap from one place, and that chap was sitting at a different place catching this information. Similarly, information by another chap was caught. Then they made a triangle and said that they are here, and then we went on a chase looking for them and got nothing. So gathering intelligence and that intelligence coordination is very important, which I see is happening now with all types of technical equipment and all. And we have to be prepared. For example, when we were inducted into Sri Lanka, we had no map about Sri Lanka. I had no map. Actually, when we went to get briefed in Jaffna Fort, I saw a town map lying on one of the tables. So I just picked it up out of interest and put it in my pocket. And that helped me to decide on my route and other things and all. So one has to be prepared. Tasks must be absolutely clear. Then people must go well equipped. Indian Army is very good at improvising, but improvisation can take place only to an extent. For example, out of these vehicles, we created armored vehicles for them. We put thick, wooden pieces around so that if bullets were fired, they never penetrated the vehicles. Now, of course, that sort of equipment is available. So it came from them only. Then radio communication, how to keep it secure. That was again very important. And when you are launched into operation, you must go with all the wherewithal and not be told that this will come later and this. And you have to plan how many days of operation will be there. So planning has to be done in great detail. So that is why you must have seen subsequent operations. They were taken very deliberately, and that is why we achieved great success, like in Kargil, or every day there are improvement in operations in JNK, and then during that period Maldives also happened.
Yes.
Maldives also happened during that period. So Maldives operation again was well planned. So I think our hierarchy, everybody learned the lessons, and the troops started getting equipped, briefed, and trained before undertaking any operation. Similarly, you must have seen how meticulously this Balakot strikes were planned. One fault line on those Balakot strikes, something else could have happened. Then this induction of troops, it is a very difficult task. But I think again we have learnt our lessons. You must have seen the induction of troops, how smoothly it happened in the harshest terrain in Ladakh in recent times. It could not have happened if we would not have learnt our lessons how it is to happen. So these are some of the major lessons. But at unit level, you have to ensure that the morale and motivation of your troops is of a very high order. And morale and motivation of the troops only comes through spirit de corps at the unit level. You have to have izzat. The unit's izzat is at stake. So you have to keep lecturing them, keep brainwashing them, and all support must be provided in rear areas. In rear areas in Dana, my wife was handling with the Subedar Major the situation. There were a lot of families, so there was panic because on those days there were no mobile phones or you couldn't even ring up. So for 15 days after we left Dhana, for 15 days there was no information where our battalion has gone, what has happened, is there any casualty, no casualty. So there was no information because we couldn't telephone. And in fact, during the 2 years telephone operations in Sri Lanka, I couldn't even make one call back home. Though later on things were established, they opened up booths at army level and all, and Jawans also got 10 minutes. So that was one thing. Then troops have to be blooded, which fortunately every day Indian Army is involved in operations.
Yes.
So that is happening. That is also again very important. And looking after the welfare of families, the rear areas, if they are happy, they are well looked after, they know that they will get their needs and all, then the morale of the troops who are actually at the front line gets boosted. So that is again very. Then you have to plan things. Actually, I was always criticized because I managed to send everybody on leave in a cycle of 3 to 4 months. If the chap gets prolonged, because the situation in Sri Lanka was not like a small insurgency like what is happening in other places. The moment a Jawan got out of his post, be sure that he will be fired. And unless he is fired upon, you don't know where the enemy is, whom you have to kill. So once you get it was a technique which I adopted. Okay, expose yourself so that you are fired upon, and then only you know that you have to kill this chap. He's a militant. Otherwise, how do you know he's a militant? So these were all some of the lessons at the unit level which were evolved. Then we also evolved a paper how to reduce casualties in battle, which again was shared with many. So these are some of the lessons at unit level. At strategic level, I'll not get into that.
Sir, just one last question. I mean, you've had a long career with the Indian Army, fought a battle or two, I'm sure, in your life. It is always the first bullet that everybody remembers. Do you remember yours? First bullet in anger that you fired and then that you heard coming towards yourself?
No, actually, the first bullet happened when I was deployed in Mizoram. When we were chasing insurgents, I was a company major then. So I was leading my troops through dense jungle and hills. And when the Mizo hostile fired, so that was the first bullet. So I could see I could make out the ring sound of that bullet. So the same thing happened here. When they fired, I immediately dismounted from my jeep, took position, and they were raw troops. They ran helter-skelter and all. But those who were well trained and had age behind them and all, they started firing back to do this ambush. So once they were blooded in this ambush, then there was no looking back for them. Once we got into the main battle in this built-up area.
It's an amazing story. So as a matter of fact, I always see people describing battles and stuff like that. One always forgets these battles are not PUBG games that we play. These battles have real blood coming out of people, and real people actually get hurt and die, no matter who it is, our Indian Army or the opposition. Death is a death which is there. Of course, the larger battle, larger plans in play are, of course, on a different paradigm altogether. Losing.
As I told you, I must also share with you, as I told you, that I felt, and so I sold this idea to everybody, it is foolish to die in battle. It is better that you kill people, but it's absolutely foolish to die in battle or become a prisoner. So let me with pride say that my unit was perhaps the only unit in Sri Lanka which suffered minimum casualties. Minimum casualties we had throughout this operation, and maximum success. Maximum success.
That's a medal of pride that you will wear along with your Vir Chakra. Sir, thank you so much for agreeing to share your story with me, and it is actually indeed quite a pleasure and an honor to have been associated with you over the span of now almost 20 years, and to get to know and understand and probably appreciate. You've told us the stories when we were kids, but to appreciate the entire thing at a very different level, at a different age, I think has given me a whole new respect. So thank you so much, sir, for what you've done and taking out the time to talk to me today afternoon.
In the end, I would only say, as I used to tell you when you trained at the Welcome Group Management Institute, that sweat in peace saves blood in war. So whatever achievement was there, because it was because of hard training, and you have to be a hard training master, and people will curse you during the training period, but later on in life they will appreciate that this was worth it.
Yes, absolutely. And one can see that happening even in the recent standoff with the Chinese. I'm sure the men trained really hard, and what they did was nothing short of, for the lack of a better word, fantastic and wonderful. So once again, thank you so much, and it's really an honor to hear the stories from a person who's actually lived through the bullets flying around him.